The 8th generation of console gaming is coming to an end, and though Nintendo are going to continue playing fast and loose with what that even means, Sony and Microsoft are well and truly ready to enter the next console generation. Looking back, there's a lot that has happened in the industry these past few years that we'll never forget, both for good reasons and for bad. From annoying industry trends that caught on like wildfire, to a burst of creativity in many, leading to some truly excellent games. In this feature, we're going to be talking about some of these things, the positives and negatives that have defined this generation. Reinventions. One of the best and most notable trends we saw this generation was how developers were so willing to take risks with even the biggest and most well-established of their franchises, and bring them back with a completely fresh new direction that we'd not have thought possible until not too long ago. The best part is that most of these worked out very well, to say the least. The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, God of War 2018, Resident Evil 7, Assassin's Creed Origins, Metal Gear Solid 5 The Phantom Pain are just a few examples of major franchises choosing to do things differently and succeeding spectacularly. Revivals. Something else that's happened frequently this generation is developers bringing back old franchises that were thought dead and buried, often to great success. The likes of Wolfenstein, Shenmue, and Streets of Rage, for instance, are all beloved classic franchises that we hadn't seen anything of in ages, but all of them managed to come back to the limelight to great success. Longer development cycles. As technology has progressed and developers have become more ambitious, the time they take to develop their games has increased exponentially. Until just the previous generation, it wasn't uncommon to see AAA games being made in a span of 2 to 3 years. And while that still happens regularly, we also see a lot of games that are in development for much, much longer periods of time before they come out. Red Dead Redemption 2, The Last of Us Part 2, Ghosts of Tsushima, The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, Horizon Zero Dawn, and the list goes on. Fewer sequels. We don't mean that the industry has stopped developing sequels, of course not. Capitalizing on established IPs is still common practice, and always will be. But with development cycles for games getting longer, we've also seen fewer games from single franchises than we did last gen, or the one before that, or the one before that. You get the idea. For instance, on the Xbox 360, Microsoft released 4 Gears of War games, but only 2 on the Xbox One. On the Xbox 360, there were 4 Halo releases, and so far on the Xbox One, there's only been 1. Last gen, we got 2 GTA games, this gen, 0. Open world. Every generation we see a genre or game design style catching on in popularity and taking over the industry. Last generation, it was shooters and online-centric games. This generation, it's all been about open worlds. Open world design has become ubiquitous, with nearly every major release insisting on either being fully open world or at least having open world elements. And while there are many who are tired of that, we're frankly all for it. We love open worlds, and having the chance to dive into large worlds with tons to do in many games has been one of our favorite things this console generation. Indie gems. Indie developers have grown in popularity at a steady clip for many years. The end of the Xbox 360 and PS3 era saw indies truly beginning to shine. In this generation, they have simply blown us all away. The likes of Hollow Knight, Ori and the Will of the Wisps, Cuphead, Celeste and Stardew Valley are legitimate all-time greats, all developed by small and passionate teams that didn't let the lack of big budgets or teams get in the way of their visions and creativity. The indie gaming boom has been one of the best things to happen to this industry, and we're glad that it shows no signs of stopping. Arcade races fading away. Something that we're far less happy about is how the arcade racing genre has faded away these last few years. Racing simulators have moved from strength to strength, and we're truly glad about that. But unfortunately, that's come at the cost of most developers choosing to ignore arcade races. Where once this industry was dominated by excellent franchises like Burnout and MotorStorm, and singular releases like Blur and Split Second and so many more, it now feels like similar games have become very, very rare. Sure, Mario Kart and Forza Horizon are still keeping us going, and AA releases like Wreckfest are great as well, but we hope that next gen sees AAA arcade races making a triumphant comeback. Crossplay. This is a very recent occurrence. Cross-platform multiplayer has started becoming standardized, allowing people to play multiplayer games with and against people regardless of which platform they're playing it on. And though there was pushback from some, such as Sony, until not too long ago, it seems like things are starting to turn around. Sure, it's still not completely standardized, and there are still major multiplayer releases that don't have crossplay, but we're hoping that things continue improving on this front in the years to come. Live services. One of the most notable trends in the industry this generation has seen developers and publishers big and small moving away from the traditional release cycle of games and going for prolonged, ongoing schedules. This in fact is another reason why sequels have become relatively less frequent, because developers often choose to release games and then stick with them rather than immediately moving on to the next thing, with frequent updates, content drops and more. It's a great idea on paper, but of course it also often goes hand in hand with some major issues. Poor launches and impressive turnarounds. Live services are the perfect example of an excellent idea that's usually poorly implemented. The idea of a game continuing to grow, change and improve over time for years after its release is an exciting one, but developers so often botch the execution. There's so many games that have released in absolutely horrible states, simply because they were using being a live service as an excuse. The likes of Anthem and Fallout 76 come to mind. But thankfully, there have also been more than a few games that have completely turned things around because of their nature as live service titles, with games like Rainbow Six Siege, Star Wars Battlefront 2, Sea of Thieves, No Man's Sky, and Destiny being the most notable examples. Microtransactions. The seeds of microtransactions were planted in the twilight years of the previous generation, with games like Dead Space 3, Mass Effect 3, and FIFA 14, thanks EA. But this generation, things got a little out of hand. Microtransactions are everywhere, and it's nearly impossible to find a multiplayer game that doesn't have in-game monetization. Hell, even some single-player games have them. For a good chunk of the generation, even pay-to-win mechanics and aggressive loot boxes were becoming increasingly common. Thanks to pushback though, we're now at least at a point where microtransactions are generally only cosmetic in nature. Battle passes. Thankfully, developers and publishers have found some relatively good ways to monetize their games. We're talking about battle passes, of course, which is honestly the best form of in-game monetization we've seen so far, and which, thankfully, more and more developers and publishers are starting to implement in their games. Of course, it says something about the state of things that we're actually praising a form of in-game monetization, but hey, at least we're past the point of pride and accomplishment now. Battle Royale. Other than open-world games, another genre that's seen a major explosion in popularity is Battle Royale games. Battle Royales became all the rage, and then well and truly entered the mainstream with Fortnite not long afterward. Now Battle Royale games are a dime a dozen, from major AAA releases to smaller experimental ones like Spellbreak. Major free-to-play releases. There was once a time in this industry, and not that long ago, when the term free-to-play was associated with low-budget casual games. Now, however, there's a barrage of major AAA multiplayer free-to-play games. Fortnite, Hyperscape, Warframe, Dauntless are all major multiplayer games that are all free-to-play. Hell, even Destiny 2 has gone free-to-play, while Rocket League is following in its footsteps as well. Most notably, Halo Infinite's multiplayer is also going to be free-to-play, which should tell you all you need to know about how viable developers now find this business model. Digital media. PC gaming has been moving deeper and deeper into digital media for a long time now, and while consoles were most reliant on physical media until not that long ago, this generation has seen the console space embracing digital as well. Publishers talk regularly about how their revenues from digital media continue to grow at a rapid rate, and where once digital-only consoles were once balked at, they are now becoming increasingly common. And in all likelihood, this is only going to continue with the next generation of consoles.
And that wraps it up. If you like what we're doing, please consider subscribing to our channel. We upload new videos daily, so make sure you don't miss them by subscribing. We appreciate your support, and we thank you for checking us out.